We're in Liverpool. It's the first time in 15 years that the Labour tribe has come together in power. You'd expect the party elders to be belting out a chorus of "Here Comes the Sun." But Labour's theme song for the week looks like becoming "A Long and Winding Road." Keir Starmer's promised to buy his own clothes in the future. His biggest union backer tells him get rid of the financial hair shirt, restore the winter fuel payments to pensioners. The Middle East is always a divisive flashpoint for Labour. A new conflict in Lebanon is bound to spark angry words in Liverpool. Israel seems in no mood to compromise. But is the Jewish state ready for two wars at the same time? So, is the Middle East heading for a full-blown regional war? We'll have an exclusive live interview with the President of Israel, Isaac Herzog. Back here, the new government is just 11 weeks old, but it's taking incoming on a number of fronts, from rows over donors and freebies to winter fuel payments and squabbles amongst advisors. So, is the PM getting knocked off course already? I'll speak to Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Union bosses matter when it comes to Labour, and the most powerful one in the country is Sharon Graham, and she's got yet more criticism for Keir Starmer. The Unite General Secretary tells this programme the Prime Minister and Chancellor are making the wrong choices. And we'll get immediate reaction to that interview with the Israeli president from the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Husam Zomlot. Plus, with us throughout the show, the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole, the chief political commentator for The Eye, Kitty Donaldson, and the chief executive of Chatham House, Bronwyn Maddox. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Party conferences are like most big family gatherings, weddings, funerals, Christmas. A chance for the tribe to get together, to remind each other of the things they have in common. Often they're also the moment to crack open the bubbly, celebrate someone's new job, catch up on the plans of that distant cousin who's been promoted to run a big department. Well, that's all happening here in Liverpool. But if you come from a big family like mine, you'll also know that it's also the opportunity for some drama, for some old feuds to surface. Add to that, this particular family, having taken over the farm, has to come up with a way of dealing with the vast debts and a legacy of poor management. And then there are the murmurings about who's splashing the cash on Angie's holidays and those nice suits for Uncle Keir and Auntie Rachel, while Granny's too strapped to turn on the heating. Well, speeches will be made, drink will be taken, and fingers will be pointed. Let's hope that things don't get out of hand. Nobody needs to end up with a fight in the car park. Let's start this morning with the government. I'm joined now by the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Can we begin with Mohammed Al-Fayed and his alleged predatory behaviour at Harrods? Back in 2009, the Crown Prosecution Service declined to prosecute Fayed under Keir Starmer's leadership. Now, even if he didn't see the file, with 130 women now coming forward, it looks as if there must have been something very wrong with the CPS at that time, doesn't it?
Look, what has come to light in recent days in particular is extremely serious. Violence against women is, an issue that we do absolutely need to tackle. When Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, he made that a personal priority. I don't know the details of what happened in 2009. There sometimes can be issues with the evidence that's presented by the police, whether that can lead to a conviction. But I think what matters most here, both in terms of the timescale around all of it, is why victims didn't see justice. I think that's what we should focus on. And absolutely, they should look into the circumstances around that.
Well, in a way, that is what is being asked. And it does make, you can't judge now, but it does feel a little bit uneasy that twice the CPS simply didn't follow this up. And this is what people, particularly women, have complained about, that actually their complaints, their allegations are not taken seriously enough, and these things are allowed to fester. Surely this is something that we need to get to the bottom of, isn't it?
Completely. And absolutely, this is a very serious issue even today. I mean, the conviction rate for rape is absolutely abysmal. I mean, women don't see justice, and that has to change. What I know is, before I became a Member of Parliament, I used to run a women's refuge for women and children who had experienced domestic violence. And the first time that I ever knew who Keir Starmer was when I saw him on television as Director of Public Prosecutions, talking about the personal priority that he attached to tackling violence against women and girls. So he's got a personal commitment to it. He turned the CPS around while he was leading it to focus on that. But clearly, if there have been issues that should be considered, that should happen. We've still got a really serious problem to this day about the lack of seriousness around tackling violence against women and girls, and that's why Yvette Cooper has made it a big mission of government to halve that.
All right, let's turn to one of the other big talking points of the week, donations. Your declaration showed that you received £14,000 from the Labour donor Lord Ali last year. What for exactly?
Yep. So I received that money from Wahid Ali, who's a long-standing Labour peer. It was used to fund 2 events, all of which was declared properly and thoroughly. That's why that information is in the public domain. The first event was ahead of my birthday, so I was turning 40. I thought it was a good opportunity to get people together in a professional context. So it was journalists, trade unionists, education people, MPs and shadow cabinet. The second event was an event that I held also again for lobby journalists, for people in the education world, as part of a reception. That's, it was in a work context,
That's a very nice thing, but if a Tory had done that 2 years ago, I know exactly what you'd be saying to me this morning. They should pay for their own birthday parties.
Look, this was in a work context. I didn't even invite my own...
You just said the same thing.
Yeah,
Come
look,
on.
I didn't even... My own family didn't come to that. It was in a work context. I celebrated my actual 40th birthday with my family. We went for a pizza. I celebrated with my kids. This was where I got together colleagues, journalists, actually, trade unionists, education people. It was in a very different kind of context. Wahid is a Labour peer. He's been a Labour peer for over 25 years. This is fully transparent. Honestly,
with respect, I think we might be digging a slightly bigger hole here. You've got a lot of people who knew you might be the Education Secretary, and you've got them in a room. You're paying for them to lobby you. I mean, the point about all of this is that to the average viewer, it feels dodgy. It feels like this is now an event for lobbyists.
No, that's absolutely not what it was. This was an opportunity for people to come together to have a reception where we can talk about, for example, issues around education. These kinds of things happen regularly. It was all declared in line with the rules and fully transparent. This was 2 events in a work context, and the information is there for the public to see.
Well, let's talk about this issue of transparency. The Chancellor apparently registered 7,500 worth of clothing as support, I'm quoting, support for her role. And Rayner had £3,500 worth of clothes registered as a donation in kind. In the interest of transparency, shouldn't they both have simply said nice clothes?
They followed the rules. They've declared it in line with the rules, and what they have said is in future they won't be. What they've said is that in future,
but they're not telling you what actually this money was for, are they? I mean, this is not transparent at all.
Look, the rules have been followed. They've declared it, and they've said that in future they won't be taking donations of that kind.
Well, look, the reason that this is so toxic is that if the other party, some other party had done this, you would be saying, this is shocking, it isn't transparent, you haven't actually told us the truth, resign, wouldn't you?
No, the whole point is it is transparent. That's why you're able to ask me questions about it.
Donations of kind doesn't say clothing.
Because it's been declared.
Donation in kind says stationery to me.
Look, the reason that we can have this conversation is because colleagues have followed the rules. I followed the rules. I've set out in the Register of Interests what donations were for, who they were from, and that's there for the public to see. And what I would say is that, of course, it is frustrating to be having this conversation with you this morning, not talking about, the wider agenda that we're setting out here in Liverpool, because we have delivered an awful lot in the very short space of time that we have been in government.
Yeah.
And, of course, this is a distraction. I'd much rather be talking to you about bigger issues.
But,
I'm happy
of course,
to
so
set
would I,
out
but
the position
I didn't fill in the
clearly.
forms. Your colleagues did. Look, the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Chancellor have all said that they're not going to be taking gifts of money, holidays and all of that. If it's wrong now, It must have been wrong last year. Will they give the money back?
Look, it was in line with the rules, but we just want to draw a line under this.
Well, you
Move
won't.
on and get on and deliver for the British people and what they voted for.
Well, you won't draw a line under it until you make clear how this actually represents transparency when support turns out to be skirts, and why, or suits, or whatever it is, and you're saying we're not going to do it anymore, but actually it was OK before. You won't draw a line until you sort that out. Will they give the money back?
Well, if they've declared it in line with the rules and they've followed it as far, very clearly they have, then I see no reason to do so.
Look, the problem is, why this is hard to understand is if they followed the rules, there's nothing wrong. Why did they decide to stop doing it now?
In order to draw a line under it so we can move on and not be talking about this and talking, frankly, about other things.
Look, in 1997, when Labour came in before, something similar happened. Labour had got a £1 million donation from Bernie Ecclestone, the guy who used to run Formula One. They gave it back in the end. Why not the same now?
Big distinction that I would draw is that if we're talking about the donations from Wahid Ali, he's a Labour peer. There's no suggestion that any of the donations were given in order to give rise to undue influence. He's a Labour peer. He's been a member of the Labour Party for a very long time, and he wanted to help secure a Labour government. That is not the same thing as what you've just described there in terms of what took place in 1997. Although I would caveat, my knowledge of what took place in 1997 is rather limited by the fact it's what I read in the papers, given that at that point in time I was still at school myself.
Well, the history is out there, and you can read Tony Blair's book about it and so on. But are you telling me that £500,000 worth of donations since 2020, irrespective of who it's from, get you no influence in the Labour Party?
The distinction I am drawing is that Wahid Ali is a Labour peer, has been for over 25 years, and unsurprisingly...
Not many Labour peers have bunged you £500,000.
Look, he's done very well in business, and unsurprisingly, as someone who made his way in the world...
I'm not complaining about that.
He's made his way in the world, he's worked really hard from pretty humble beginnings, he's a Labour peer, and he wants to support Labour politicians in delivering a Labour government. I don't think, to be honest, that's a surprise to anybody that has met Wahid over the years.
You brought in Sue Gray to prepare you for government, and that you wouldn't experience what you call the chaos of the last lot, as you usually describe them. Sue Gray has now notoriously become the story herself. And we are not talking, as you say, about housing and health and education, because we still need to get complete answers on some of these issues. And by the way, we're also, or the press is talking about Sue Gray. Is it time for the leader himself just to get a grip on all of this?
Look, I think it's difficult to talk about staff publicly because they don't have right of reply. What I would say about Sue Gray is that she is someone who brings enormous expertise, particularly in the running of government, to this role. She, in the dealings that I've had with Sue, has always been highly professional and focused on delivering. And the fact that we were able to do so much work in preparation from opposition means that in education, I've been able to move at pace to deliver, to start the process of setting up Skills England, so we can make sure we've got more apprenticeship starts, that we've got more skills training, reformed Ofsted, set up a curriculum review, invested more in speech and language support. We're not a government that is short of things that we have already, in a very short space of time, got on and done. In little over 3 months, we've got a big, long list of how we are delivering on the priorities of the British people. We know people voted for change. That's why we've got on and delivered it. But I appreciate when everything at the moment seems really broken, people question whether it can get any better. And that's what we're determined to show this week.
What her great expertise has brought is the fact that I've got to ask you about all of this stuff. And this morning we're seeing that Keir Starmer's personal ratings have dived to below those of Rishi Sunak. Frankly, is that worth £170,000 a year?
Look, I'm not... It's, as I say, it's difficult to talk about individual staff because they don't have the right of reply. Sue does bring tremendous experience, and I think if you look across the board at what we've delivered, whether it's GB Energy, what we're saying today around housing, all of the work that we've delivered on education, we know that people put their trust in us on the 4th of July, and we are determined this week to show that change has begun and that we are delivering from government on what people did vote for. All
right, let's talk about big politics, as it were. It's reported that Rachel Reeves might have a little bit more fiscal headroom as she prepares for the budget. because of the way that the Bank of England's reporting its numbers. Would you like to see her spend that money keeping winter fuel allowance?
I think if I speculated to you this morning about what is or isn't in the budget, Rachel Reeves would be on my case pretty sharpish.
Oh, come on, Bridget, be brave.
What I would say is that, you know, the economy is in a terrible mess. Your viewers will know that, and we've got to fix the foundations. That did involve some really difficult choices back when we first became the new government in July in order to stabilise the economy, because people know what happens when you haven't got a grip, because they're still paying the price for it. They're paying more on their rent and mortgage because of that devastating mini-budget. On the winter fuel allowance specifically, none of us wanted to have to make that decision. We didn't want to do it. We didn't expect to have to do it. But the last government, they walked away from these tough choices. Take education. They received the independent pay review body report saying how much they were expected to pay teachers. They refused to publish it. They walked away. They left it for somebody else to fix. And that presents some really tough choices.
But your biggest donor, actually, Sharon Graham, says that actually that's all true, but you're making the wrong choices about the way you go about this. And that, above all, Rachel Reeves should free herself from the Tory fiscal rules, because in the end what they mean is a return to austerity, not more money for education, not more money for poverty, not more money for children. Actually, you have to agree with that, don't you?
Well, we are investing more in education, and that's why, as I've just been saying, we did deliver on that pay rise for teachers, because I know if we want to drive high standards in our schools, we've got to have brilliant people at the front of the classroom delivering it. And yes, that is a choice. And it's a choice, by the way, that the last government refused to take. They left it to us. They left this huge gap in the public finances and walked away from it and abdicated their responsibility. We are not prepared to abdicate our responsibility in these tough choices.
But Sharon Graham's essentially saying that you're wrong. She got it round her neck then?
Say again? I don't...
Sharon's saying that you're making the wrong choices. Has she just got it all completely wrong?
Look, Sharon's entitled to her opinion and to argue for what she believes to be right for her members. Of course she is. But I think what she will see and others will see is that we are determined to deliver a better deal for working people, whether that's rights at work or the pay awards that we've been able to give to public sector workers, like nurses, like teachers, who are absolutely central to the change that we want to deliver across government.
Well, look, the big argument that's going to be on the floor here and on fridge and so on will be about this winter fuel allowance. She says that your decision to take money away from pensioners at the same time as taking money from millionaires is, and using her words now, cruel, a mistake, and embarrassing. Why doesn't it embarrass you?
Well, I certainly don't like it. I mean, I take absolutely no relish in the fact that we've had to make this decision. It was not a decision.
You could have made a lot of choices.
It was not a decision that we expected to make. It was certainly not one that we wanted to make. Look, there was that huge gap in the public finances, £22 billion. The Tories knew that. They called an election, they walked away, and they left it to somebody else to sort out. We will fix it, by the way. We will sort this. We will get our economy back on a much firmer footing, and we will deliver some hope and optimism about the difference that we can make. Because I know that everyone looks around the country and thinks, God, everything's broken.
Let me just stop you there, because you just said something very interesting. Everything you say is interesting, but you said we will fix it. Does that mean that at some point we might see that money back in the pockets of pensioners?
We will fix the economy. We'll deliver a fair deal for everyone, but crucial to that, the way that we'll do it is by driving growth in our economy. That's why we've said that's our #1 mission. The reason the last Labour government were able to invest in public services was because we grew our economy. The record at the last government, what we've inherited, is dismal. But it's also a great opportunity to transform our country. If we're going to drive growth, we will need to make sure that there's good jobs in construction and skills and apprenticeship starts and much more besides. So it all goes hand in hand.
OK, by the way, you're great friends with Rachel. Will she be listening to this and thinking, maybe I can vary it a bit?
I'm not going to prejudge whatever. Rachel knows her own mind. And I know in the budget that she'll set out next month, she will make sure that we get our economy on a firm footing, because that's what needs to happen.
Bridget Phillipson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, if you fancy a daily dose of all things political, check out our Politics at Jack and Sam's podcast. Our very own deputy political editor, Sam Coates, and Politico's Jack Blanchard, they'll tell you everything you need to know for the day ahead. And they'll do that in under 20 minutes. And you'll get it all before 7:30 in the morning. There's a QR code on your screen now, and you can listen and you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And also, let me give you a reminder. Given the extremely tense situation in the Middle East, coming up after the top of the hour, we'll bring you a live interview with the President of Israel, that's Isaac Herzog. We'll get his view on the country's attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon and what happens next in Gaza. Well, let's get on to the stars of our show and see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole, the chief political commentator for The Eye, Kitty Donaldson, and the chief executive of Chatham House, Bronwyn Maddox. Kitty, I thought Bridget Phillipson made a valiant effort at saying it's all going to be all right.
It's all
Convinced?
fine, Trevor. Am I convinced? I think they very much would like this story to go away, let's be honest. I was quite surprised, actually, when she came on and she said, I took some money for a birthday party, or 2 birthday parties, one for journalists, to which I wasn't invited. I was a bit miffed, actually, to hear that. And another one for trade unions and donors. And I think the public will look at that and be a bit like, oh, really? Really? For birthday parties? But I think they're making a valiant,
okay,
if slightly snail-like effort towards the kind of policy details.
Harry, did you get any of the canapes at that $4,000?
I actually was invited, but I didn't go.
Okay. I was there, but I wasn't involved.
Exactly.
Almost.
You did inhale.
Present, but not involved. I think you were invited as well, weren't you, Trevor?
I have no recollection.
Look, I mean, I thought the whole point is that we were meant to, the days of arguing about was it a work event and was there cake, and all of that was meant to have been cleared out with not just Boris Johnson, but the Tory government of past. And the problem is that this new Labour government have walked into the same bear traps, the same ridiculous, rows and silliness, and just, you'd think that anyone with a sort of political antennae might have just avoided some of this stuff, especially as the fact that Mr. Rules, Starmer, has made such a pious virtue of being whiter than white. He will, he mentions it at Cabinet, reminding everyone that they need to, stick to the ministerial code. And here he is, walking into these traps.
And he's employed the head of ethics, Sue Gray,
Yes,
who
exactly.
investigated the arsons. You would have thought there was a hypersensitivity to all this.
Yeah.
Do you think we're making a little too much of it? Or is this another Partygate, Bronwyn?
No, not yet, but it's not going away. It has a stickiness which points to lots and lots of these decisions, and that's why it's not going away. You asked the right question, is the money going back? Obviously, that's a question they don't want answered. And I think, I'm sure they're regretting it now. The amounts of money are comparatively small to the political cost that they're now paying for it. But it just speaks to a kind of misjudgment, which maybe they won't make again, but one that I'm surprised is as widespread as it seems from all these details.
At one level, it sounds like great fun for us, and, we can tease them and all the rest of it. But there is a sense in which this feeds an underlying sentiment out there, which was expressed by the fact that the Labour and Conservative parties together had the lowest joint percentage in the last election, 57.4 ever, that actually the country doesn't think much of conventional politics, and there's a kind of, they're all the same drumbeat coming.
Absolutely. And I've spoken both privately to lots of now cabinet ministers, and when they were in opposition, and Keir Starmer, who sort of worried that the public just thinks a plague on both your houses, and that there's a kind of cynicism that was becoming calcified in British public life. And I think this row couldn't have come at the worst possible time, when we've got the winter fuel allowance backdrop and pensioners worried about weather turning and them having to put their heating on. It just doesn't sit with the doom and gloom of Keir Starmer's messaging, however cheerful he gets this week, and I don't think he will get very cheerful, however cheerful he gets this week.
No parties.
No.
There would be no photographs of anybody drinking champagne at this conference.
Or any bits of cake. But, you know, there is a bigger picture. The point is that there isn't a lot of money in British politics.
Yeah.
And this has gone on for a long time. For example, the MPs' expenses, which left a very bad impression for the whole public of what MPs are up to. There are always arguments for paying them a little bit more, but that goes down like a lead balloon with most of the public, particularly against this backdrop of bits of money being paid off other people. But the fact is, they're scrabbling for bits of money to try and look smart on telly.
The Reform Conference on Friday.
Mr. Farage.
And also, exactly to the point, your point and your point about this underlying tension, you couldn't get a cigarette paper between the level of cheering, or booing, in fact, every time the Labour government was mentioned and the previous Tory government. So you're totally right that you know, if Farage can capitalise on that feeling of, you know, they are all the same, they're as bad as each other, there is a real opening for him, I think. He got 4 million votes last time, you know, another 2 million votes off of disillusioned Tories and 1 million votes off of disillusioned Labour voters. 1 in 6 saying they regret voting Labour now in a poll the other day. You know, the things could get quite lively quite quickly.
And, by the way, your paper backed Labour.
Yeah, we did. We want them to do well. We're hoping...
You must be pretty hacked off.
No, look, we backed them because we want them to do well. They were going to win. It's clear that the country wanted change, but I'm not sure this is quite the change they had in mind. Quite a lot of loose change.
Having second thoughts?
We'll see. Look, it's early days. They're 11 weeks in, but the teething problems clearly need to be sorted out.
The other problem, of course, of timing is that this has all happened, and then there's a winter fuel allowance to set against it, and that's the contrast has made things worse. I was quite struck, though, that Bridget didn't quite say we're actually going to see this through. Do you think there's any wiggle room here for Rachel Reeves?
I don't think on the winter fuel allowance. I think she would now look weak if she changed her mind on that, and I think they now make the argument they made in the first place was this will save some money. The argument they now make is it's a better target to get pensioners who need it on pension credit, and then you get the pensioners at the very bottom of the income scale. I think where we might see some changes is around the fiscal rules, and I know you've talked to Sharon Graham about that. And there's a kind of argument in going on in Labour circles about whether she should be... It's almost the same parallel argument as whether Keir Starmer should be so sort of gloomy. It's whether Rachel should be so sort of dour about the public finances, or whether she should invest to boost the economy and include growth and get growth going.
What do you think about this fiscal rule thing, Bronwyn? Could she loosen the corset a little bit?
Yes, you need fiscal rules of some kind if you're going to borrow money, and also to put a kind of structure around your spending plans and to make sure that you've got a plan for all these different competition, these different requests for spending. So you do need some, and if you don't have any explanation to the markets, you see what happened with Liz Truss, the markets take a very dim view. But they don't have to be exactly these fiscal rules. There probably is a bit of wiggle room in there, but there isn't going to be a lot. The country has an awful lot of debt.
It's going to be a sort of penny on the tiller sort of thing. Mix my metaphors there.
A touch on the tiller.
Changing the debt rules, I think, is how they're going to do it. How they classify debt. Kitty will probably know more than me, having worked in financial journalism for a long time. Changing the rules to basically give them a bit more wriggle room, a bit more, lo and behold, a bit more, a couple of billion here and there down the back of the sofa, so things might not have to be as gloomy as the pitch rolling we've seen so far, which is. But one point I would make is I think they would have got away with the winter fuel payment thing if they hadn't have given the train drivers a pay rise to 90 grand the next day. Once again, it's the politics and the optics that are ruining it for them.
Bronwyn, just very quickly before we go to the top of the hour, I'm going to be talking to the Israeli president a little later. You've, in fact, just come back from Israel. What's the mood there?
It is grim in so many different ways. This is a country still in trauma from October 7th. This huge attack on the nation, and more than 100 hostages still there, although more than 30, I think, thought to be dead. No real plan about how to go forward. Bewilderment at why the world, including Friends, UK, they point to why Friends are criticising them. Real disconnect between, I think, how Israel sees itself and how much of the world is seeing Israel. And you see the signs of the hostages everywhere, these pictures, the name, the ages crossed out and 1 year older written in. What you don't see on Israeli television, which Israelis acknowledge, is much of what's going on in Gaza. The families wiped out, the rubble, the refugees, the deaths, the hospitals. You don't see that. And so it is a country quite split off from how others are seeing it. But then you do have this government, and this is, I suspect, something of what we're going to talk about, this government, which is igniting, it seems to me, a conflict on the northern border. Good reasons for that, but right now, and doing more on the West Bank. We can come on to that.
OK. It is now 9 o'clock. You're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Education Secretary has told this programme that the £14,000 she received in donations from a Labour peer was to pay for 2 birthday events. Bridget Phillipson said that this was in a work context, while defending Labour's decision to cut winter fuel payments to pensioners. Lots more to come this morning. Shortly, we'll hear from Sharon Graham. The General Secretary of Unite has frankly blistering criticism of the Labour leadership as its party conference starts. Then we'll be joined live by the President of Israel, Isaac Herzog, as his country intensifies its attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're making the wrong choices, a damning verdict from the country's most powerful union boss on the current Labour leadership. Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham has told this programme that cutting winter fuel payments is a cruel policy and must be reversed. She's worried that the government's heading for austerity Mark II. I spoke to her earlier. What do you want to hear from Keir Starmer in his leader's speech?
Well, look, I think the priority that I'd like to hear from him is that he's going to reverse the decision on the winter fuel allowance. It's a cruel policy. He needs to reverse it. And I'd like him to say that he's made a misstep and to reverse that policy. I'd also like him to say that we're not going to take this country down austerity Mark II. People voted for change. They need to see change, and he needs to reverse the winter fuel allowance and let people have that £300 so they can put their heating on this winter.
That is quite a big ask. You're asking him to say, I made a mistake. Party leaders don't do that.
Well, look, sometimes people do make mistakes. Leaders, I think, should do that. The reality here is it is a misstep. You've got a situation where the poorest in our society, the first thing that Labour does is take away the winter fuel allowance from the poorest in our society, whilst they leave the most wealthiest people pretty much untouched. The top 50 families in Britain, the most wealthiest families in Britain, are worth £500 billion. £500 billion. That's the same as half of Britain. Why was that not the choice made? Why wasn't the choice made to tax the wealthy? Why would you hit pensioners? It's completely wrong, and they need to reverse it.
Well, let me put this to you. Labour's a party of redistribution. You're saying that. Why is it wrong for them to save 300 quid from pensioners, a lot of whom are quite well off? A quarter of pensioners are millionaires, asset millionaires, and save the money to be able to give it to low-paid trade unionists who work in the public sector and are represented by Unite?
Well, look, and I think it's a false choice. I mean, who decided that pensioners had to be pitted against workers? Where was that choice ever made? Who said that was a choice that had to be made? The reality is the winter fuel allowance saves around £1.4 billion. It's peanuts, actually, in the greater scheme of things, in terms of what we're talking about. The wealth tax I'm proposing, 1% on the richest 1%, would bring in £25 billion. That would take away the so-called black hole. Job done. We'd have £3 billion left over. Why would you think it was the right thing to do to actually take away the winter fuel allowance? I've got people stopping me and speaking to me in workplaces and high streets saying, what are Labour doing? It's almost jaw-dropping that they've chosen to make this decision. They need to reverse that decision.
Actually, some people might ask, by the way, Unite represents workers. Why are you so steamed up about pensioners?
Well, look, I represent workers, of course, but in my union, I've also got 100,000 pensioners. We've got a campaigning arm within our union, so actually I represent both. I've got 1 million workers in my union and pensioners. But the reality is the mood music here is that they are taking away from the poorest in our society. Now, and actually, the conversation they're having is walking us, I believe, into austerity Mark II. Nobody wants to see that. Workers don't want to see it, communities don't want to see it, and I can tell you the pensioners don't want to see it either.
You've gone a bit further than the winter fuel allowance, and you're calling, in a motion that you've submitted to conference, for the Chancellor to abandon her fiscal rules. But this week, the ONS revealed that our borrowing has now hit 100% of GDP. Surely this is the worst possible moment for the Chancellor to take the corset off and subject us to perhaps having to borrow.
Well, look, this is the thing that comes out all of the time in terms of fiscal rules and blinding people with the fiscal rules. They've changed 9 times since 1997. In 1945, Trevor, we had a debt to GDP of over 250%.
Yeah, but we fought a war. We fought a war.
Well, it was crisis. It was crisis, and we had a debt to GDP of over 250%. And when we came back, and when Labour got in 1945, they didn't say tighten your belts, we've had a war, we've all got to, do a little bit less and with a little bit more. They didn't do anything like that. What they said was we will build. They built the National Health Service. They made sure they put their arms around the working class. We've got a position now where we need to invest for jobs, because if we don't invest for jobs, then we're not going to have the jobs for the future. We need to invest for jobs, and we need money in our crumbling public services. Yes, because the Tories have trashed it. I absolutely agree. This is not of Labour's making, but they are in government now. And when you're in government, you must lead. And that means we have to spend money in the right places.
Your other beef is about jobs. Now, Rachel Reeves, Ed Miliband, Keir Starmer are talking about the green transition, moving towards a situation in which more of our energy produced through renewables and so on. What's wrong with what they're saying?
Well, look, the difficulty that you've got at the moment is, yet again, working class communities are paying the price. We are going to end up with these communities being the coal miners of our generation. They've got one side of the equation, which is what they want net zero by certain dates. That's one side of the equation. There is absolutely nothing being done on where are the jobs for the people in these areas. So you take oil and gas. We know 30,000 jobs are being gone by 2030. They will be gone. That's not up for debate. Everybody agrees that. Why aren't we creating the jobs for the future for those people in Scotland? We could be a wind manufacturer powerhouse. We could sell turbines to other parts of Europe, but we haven't done absolutely anything in relation to that. And we cannot have a jobless transition. It's not acceptable for Labour to talk about net zero, but not put in the jobs for the future. I've said to them directly, are they going to say to me that somebody driving an electric bike, delivering a pizza, is that a green job? Is that the jobs they're talking about? We need to have jobs that are commensurate with the jobs in oil and gas, commensurate with the jobs in steel, so that workers and communities are getting a fair deal. I want to see the other half of that equation. I
was struck this week listening to Peter Mandelson, who, by the way, a year ago was on this show, and the two of you, though nobody would put you in the same political bracket, agreed on one thing, that there should be an industrial strategy. And he made an interesting point, which is the government is promoting offshore wind, but we don't make the cables that would bring it ashore. And therefore, we need to have, I guess, an integrated industrial strategy. Are you on the same page as Mandelson on this?
Well, goodness, I mean, I never thought I would be on the same page as Peter Mandelson, but on this particular point, I agree with that. I mean, the reality is, and I'm talking about the industries of the future, you can't say there's jobs for the future and not define them. We have just said that we've won some projects at an auction in relation to offshore wind, but we're going to go to Denmark in order to build the turbines. Why aren't the turbines being built here?
Let's talk about the place that the government's in, and it's room for manoeuvre politically. One of your sponsored MPs, Diane Abbott, has complained that Keir Starmer promised change. But the main change he's delivered, she says, is to put the Labour Party in the hands of millionaire donors. Do you agree?
Well, look, I think that Britain is better under a Labour government. I absolutely do think that, and I still think that. I think we are better under a Labour government. And let's not forget what we've just come out of. The reason we are in this situation is we've had 14 years of austerity. We've had 14 years of trashing public services. So let's not let the Tories off. I mean, this is their mess. But the thing when you come into leadership is that you need to clean up the mess. And you can't say to everyday people who paid for the 2008 crash, the financial crash that was not of their making, but they paid for it while bankers' bonuses have been given back. We had COVID. Those same low-paid people went out, they dealt with COVID, and they came back and were told, you're not going to get a pay rise. It's completely not acceptable to allow us to go into austerity Mark 2 when you have triple the number of billionaires, when you have wealth in the sixth richest economy in the world. Labour should be coming in and saying, those of you at the back of the queue, for the last 14 years, workers and communities, we're going to put you at the front of the queue. And that's what I expect Labour to do.
But I'm asking you, I mean, in fact, you're a generous donor yourself on behalf of your union. But do you agree with Diane Abbott's point that the party seems to be, from her point of view, in the hands of at least one, probably more, millionaire donors, and that's a problem. It's a political problem, perception problem.
Well, I think that they're making the wrong choices. Why they're making the wrong choices, we don't know. We're not in any of the rooms and having those conversations, but they definitely are making the wrong choices. How we've got ourselves into a position where they've made the choice on the winter fuel allowance, I cannot even imagine how that conversation started. I certainly can't imagine how it got agreed. I just don't know who was in that room when that got agreed. So for me, wrong choices are being made, and they need to review and they need to listen. They need to listen to what people are saying. Good people who want Labour to do well are finding it, quite frankly, embarrassing that we are in a situation where we're taking that money off of the poorest in our society, and they need to reverse the decision.
The conversation, a lot of the conversation has been about what people call freebies, gifts, clothes. By the way, has anybody offered to pay for your clothes or sent you Taylor Swift tickets?
No, I mean, you could evidently see I buy my own clothes, so no, absolutely, people haven't done that. I mean,
you always dress immaculately, Sharon.
But when I first took over as General Secretary of Unite, within weeks, the first thing I did was introduce a gifts and hospitality policy. I did it literally one of the first acts that I did. And the reason that I did it was that happens in organisations, it happens evidently in politics. And I wanted to be really clear in my own union, there is no acceptance for that. We do not accept gifts and we do not accept hospitality. We were actually given some tickets to an event and we raffled them through our shop stewards, and one of our shop stewards in Manchester won it, took his wife, had an absolutely wonderful time. And so I think there are things that you can do to say, look, actually, as an organisation, as a political party, as the House, we're just not accepting this because it can, even if nothing's happening from it, the perception is why would the gifts be given? And that's obviously a problem.
When your members read about this and look at all of this, the suits, the frocks and so on, what do you think they're feeling?
Well, look, I think on the frocks, since you've mentioned that, I do feel that for Keir Starmer's wife, I think it's pretty unfair, some of what's been levelled at her. She happens to be married to the Prime Minister, and I think it's been unfair. But why I took the decision in Unite, one of the first acts that I did when I went in was to put in a gifts and hospitality policy. The reason I did that is that it can look as though people are paying for favours. I'm sure that's not what's happened. There's no evidence, actually, that that's what's happened. But when you're coming in to say, I'm going to change things, I'm going to lead things, I'm going to make politics different, it is important that you build that up with actions.
Last point, then. The Prime Minister, Chancellor, Deputy Prime Minister have all said they're not going to take these gifts, they're not going to take this kind of money again. I think the question that then arises is, if it's wrong now, it must have been wrong before. Should they give the money back?
Well, look, I think the issue was that, I mean, that's the matter for them, but I think the issue is this seems to be something that goes on in politics. It's the first I'd heard of it, actually. I've never been offered any of these things, nor would I take it. I mean, the reality is it seems to be what's going on. But I think a break should be put on that. There's such distrust with politics. People look at it and think, actually, it's murky. And so what needs to happen is it needs to be above everything. Put in a gifts and hospitality policy across the House so it can't happen in future, and then move on and get on with the serious work of running the country.
Sharon Graham, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Israel has carried out fresh strikes on targets in Lebanon today as it hunts for leaders and fighters from the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah, which is considered to be a terrorist organisation in many countries. With no sign of a ceasefire in Gaza and the entire Middle East tense, the real worry is that we're on the brink of a full-blown regional war. So just how far is Israel willing to escalate, and how does this end? Well, I think I can speak now to the President of Israel. No, he's not quite there yet. Bronwyn, we were saying before that interview that you had been in Israel. Is there the government that they've got now? It's obviously very divisive. Do you think that actually Netanyahu has a plan to get to the end of this?
I wondered how you were going to finish that sentence. He's got a plan, I think, which is to stay in power. Despite corruption charges coming down the rules, he's already pulled off quite a political revival. His ratings are on the floor after October 7th because he had been Mr. Security. Now he's made a huge kind of comeback. He wants to stay in power and he wants to hit out at Israel's enemies. So that's as far as the plan goes, I think. Where does this take Israel, I think, is the bigger question. And as you're saying, he's divisive at home. He's not doing enough in the view of much of the country to bring back the hostages. And it's not clear that it's actually going to give Israel security. He's hitting at the enemies, what he calls a ring of fire, to the north now, to the south with Hamas. A lot of violence going on the West Bank. A lot of Palestinians been killed there. But is this going to give Israel any kind of ability to live in the region at peace? And I would say no.
What are they saying in Israel about our government's actions? We've decided to put an embargo on 30 weapons components. We've refunded UNRWA, the Relief and Works Agency in Gaza.
We've said we won't block the International Criminal Court, various other changes.
What are they saying about us?
Deep hurt. We don't understand. We must be supporting Hamas. We must not understand how vile the things that Hamas did to Israelis on October the 7th were. How can we not understand? And the thing they say is, we expect more of friends. Who do you want to win? And the idea that Britain, a friend of Israel, this government and previous, might be trying to nudge that friend in a direction which Britain considers better for the region, indeed better for Israel, that goes down really badly.
OK, we can now go to speak to the President of Israel, Isaac Herzog. Good morning, Mr. Herzog.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to all.
Last night, Israel attacked several targets in Lebanon. Do you accept that whatever the justification for doing so, escalation of the conflict could trigger an all-out regional war?
It is clearly a very dangerous situation and clearly has a potential of escalating dramatically, but we have to understand the situation in prima facie, meaning Hezbollah started this war. It started following the horrendous attack of Hamas on October 7th. Hezbollah since then has been bombarding us endlessly. Almost 100,000 Israelis have been evacuated from their homes. The entire north has been shattered. We kept on being restrained and restrained and restrained, but something has to end. We have to bring our citizens back to their homes. That's the most natural obligation of any nation to its citizens.
Are you saying now that Israel has decided, in essence, to abandon restraint, that the walkie-talkie bombs, the air attacks in the last few days are really the way that things are going to happen from now on?
I actually reiterated over the weekend the simple message of Israel. We do not want war. We absolutely did not seek this war. We didn't want this war. This war was instigated by the empire of evil, the Iranian proxies in the region under the command of Iran, from the south, from Hamas, from the north by Hezbollah, from Yemen by the Houthis, from Iraq, from all over the place as part of a strategy. As the supreme leader of Iran just said yesterday, that Israel is a tumor that must be removed. So therefore, Israel is fighting for its well-being, its existence, its citizens. That's what we are doing, and we are doing whatever is the right thing to do. Think for a moment. Had the Bournemouth citizens been evacuated to Manchester for a year under attacks from one of the neighbours or Brighton, how long would the British government be restrained? So we actually decided to change the equation, and we are working to change this equation, meaning we have to bring our hostages back from Gaza, and we have to make sure that this attack does not recur from Gaza. And we have to make sure that this attack does not recur again from Lebanon. That's all there is. It's very simple, and life can go on in a peaceful manner on an internationally recognized boundary between Israel and Lebanon.
Mr. President, I want to come back to some of those issues in a second, but just if we can get one thing clear. Is Israel now at war with Lebanon?
Israel is not interested to be at war with Lebanon. I'm actually saying something very, very clear. We do not want to get into a war with Lebanon, but Lebanon has been hijacked by a terror organization, which is also a political party in Lebanon, called Hezbollah. It's been armed to its teeth by the Iranian empire of evil. And all of these leaders who were eradicated on Friday by the Israeli attack, all of these leaders were meeting together in order to launch the same horrific, horrendous attack that we had on October 7th by Hamas, by burning Israelis, butchering them, raping their women, abducting and taking hostage old people and young and little babies. This is exactly the same plan that they've been planning for years under the plans of the empire of evil of Iran. So we are fighting actually the whole war, the war for the entire free world. That's what we are doing. We don't want to get to war. We don't. We want to bring our citizens back to their homes on the border with Lebanon.
Mr. President, let's talk about how Israel has prosecuted this war. It's generally assumed that Israel's security forces were behind the exploding pages and walkie-talkies last week. Whoever was behind those attacks, they could not possibly be sure, even if they were aimed at the people you've just illustrated, they could not be sure of who was going to be in the room, in the chair at that point. And in this particular case, others who were not amongst that group were killed, including children. Is this a legitimate way to prosecute a war?
First of all, I reject out of hand any connection to this or that source of operation. All I say is that just at the opening of the Olympic Games, 12 Israeli children of the Druze religion were murdered by a terrible missile attack, rocket attack by Hezbollah in Majd al-Shams, where they were playing football. Your network is a very distinguished one and is quite connected to the world of football. There are terrible tragedies in this war, and we never want to get there. But we have the inherent right to defend ourselves, and the fact is that houses have been demolished, Israelis were killed, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Druze, all in the northern part of Israel, where they live peacefully. They're evacuated from their home for a year, and Hezbollah keeps on sending its missiles against our people endlessly. At the end, you have the right to defend yourself. You're trying to convince them. There was a huge American effort. There's an outstanding American diplomat, Amos Hochstein, who went back and forth. It did not help. They keep on fighting, and we have to take steps in order to defend our people.
Mr. President, I don't think anybody would argue about Israel's right to defend itself. I think the question that I'm asking you about is the manner of the defense. And then just to be getting one thing clear, are you saying that Israel denies any responsibilities for those explosions this week, and that you think they might have been the responsibility of someone else, like, for example, the Druze?
I did not allude to anything except saying that there are many enemies of Hezbollah out there, quite a few these days. Hezbollah has been choking Lebanon, destroying Lebanon, creating havoc in Lebanon again and again and again. We are here simply to defend ourselves. That's all we do. And we make clear that we have to take action like any normal nation would do, like Britain would do, or any other sovereign nation in order to defend its people.
Let me ask you then about Israel's position in the world. British government suspended... Sorry,
go on.
Can you hear me now, Mr. President? Yes. Let me ask
hear
you
you
now
well.
about
Sorry,
Israel's
sorry.
standing. Thank you. Can I ask you about Israel's standing in the world? Britain has suspended export license for some weapons components, restored funding to UNRWA, and withdrawn its opposition to the prosecution of your Prime Minister in the International Criminal Court. Do you understand why relations between Israel and some of its traditional allies might be cooling just a year after the world stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel because of October 7th? Do you understand how and why things have changed?
You know, we are a democracy, and we are a vibrant, aggressive democracy, aggressive in the sense of debate. Believe me, we have Israeli media at least equals the American or the British media. We have at least hundreds of thousands of demonstrators every week against the government. It's part of a beautiful, proud democracy. And sometimes I'm quite surprised at our friends. I believe our friends should understand that we are fighting the war, their war too, in the long term. You have to understand that there is an empire of evil which really thinks and believes as part of an ideology in the jihadist ideology, in conquering the Middle East and moving on into Europe and the rest of the world. They call you Satans. They want to plant bomb in your cities all over the world. Hezbollah has terror cells situated in countries all over the world. So, and you ask yourself, why? How come Iran armed a tribe in Yemen called the Houthis on the seashore of the Red Sea, and they're affecting the cost of living of each and every British family or European family or American family? This cannot go on.
Mr. President,
the world has to make
I'm sorry to
Iran that this cannot go on.
I know you have to go. So does that mean that you are disappointed in the way that the British government has acted in the last few weeks towards Israel, the new British government?
Look, we have outstanding relations with the British government. We have outstanding relations with the people of Britain. I have personally very close affinity with His Majesty's government and with Britain at large. But we also have to understand that between friends, we expect friends and allies to be there for us all the time as we are for them. And clearly, yes, it's true, there is a certain sense of disappointment in Israel. There is a sense of disappointment in Israel, and I expressed it to my friends. I met with Prime Minister Starmer at the opening of the Olympic Games. We expect that all our allies will be side by side with us in combating this terrible situation and fighting like we are to bring back our hostages home. There are 101 Israeli hostages there, and 352 days they are in the dungeons of Gaza.
Can I ask you then, if bringing back the hostages is important, getting towards peace and so on, the countries, as you put it, is united against Hamas, it's united against Hezbollah, but it is deeply divided, as you yourself said, there are demonstrations every week and so on, about your own government. Is Mr. Netanyahu and his government the right set of people to reach a settlement?
I think it's an unfair question. I work very closely with the Prime Minister of Israel and with his government, and I will work with any government and any Prime Minister. Netanyahu is the third Prime Minister in my term as President of the State of Israel. The misleading information here is that in order to bring the hostages back and exit from the war, we need to understand that the one who's blocking this is Yahya Sinwar, the commander of Hamas, and the leader of Hamas, who's in the caves in Gaza, in the tunnels, and with his allies. If you think, look at Nasrallah. One last sentence. Nasrallah from Hezbollah. Yes. He says specifically and implicitly, you know, that all his war against us has to do with Gaza. So in order to change that equation, one has to fight in order to change the equation. And that is exactly what we're trying to do.
One last important question, if I may. You've mentioned Iran. You've described it as an empire of evil. How far is Israel prepared to go to battle against Iran? Do you see a situation in which Israel might one day send missiles against targets in Iran? And how far, how savage could this conflict become?
Well, that is exactly the question on the table of the international community. Israel has always made clear that it will go all the ways that's needed in order to defend and protect its people and to remove any threats that are existential to the state of Israel, the only nation state of the Jewish people around the globe, a democracy which has Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, and so many other religions, beliefs, lifestyle, and all. We are very proud of our nation. Again, I say specifically, we did not want this war. This war was launched against us by Hamas and now by Hezbollah. But we have to remove that threat and enable our people to live in peace. That's all we're asking, like any decent nation around the globe.
And you will remove it by any and all of your weapons? You're ready to use any and all of your weapons?
Now you're starting to go into all sort of theoretical. I don't intend to reply in such a manner. This is a totally different question than the question of today.
Mr. President, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Good day to all of you.
In just a moment, we'll get reaction to that from our panel.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We're being crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, back to our panel, Harry Cole, Kitty Donaldson and Bronwyn Maddox. Harry, he sounded pretty cheesed off with our government.
I think he sounded exhausted, frankly. There's a sort of, sense of, like, how are we still here to still defend this? And Israel can't win in one way. If, they're accused of being indiscretionate and flattening apartment blocks, and then they do the most surgical strike on Hezbollah. You couldn't get a more targeted strike, and they get attacked for that. So, but yeah, no, I think there's been definitely a shift in relations with Israel under the new Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. But then I think he would have gone further if he could on restrictions. I think the Americans came in and, made sure that the arms embargo was actually fairly limited. They didn't touch the F-35s, for example, which would have been a much bigger gesture in terms of restriction on Israel. And you almost end up in the worst of worlds. You've done this big signal to your base, your Labour. Let's not pretend there's not politics involved in this. They lost those seats to the 5 independents over the just in July. The Gaza issue is a big problem for the left in the left of the Labour Party. They're feeling that, so they do this sort of minimal gesture, which ends up annoying Israel. Sending the wrong signal to our only democratic ally in the region, and yet you also don't really... It's sort of pointless. So you've ended up thinking, what, was it worth it?
It is being said that actually the government's new stance on new-ish emphasis on the Middle East has ended up in a situation where nobody likes it.
Yes, and I kind of look at this in a wider view, which is, if you look where we were a year ago in terms of Israel just signed the Abraham Accords, they were making advances in the Middle East towards having a sort of buffer zone of Arabic states around them who could support them and maybe put a bit of pressure on the Palestinians. And now, next week, I think we're still waiting to see whether Benjamin Netanyahu will go to the United Nations General Assembly next week. If he does go, big demonstrations planned in New York. And this sense that however kind of, we think we're the victim here, and that's legitimate, that the wider world is saying that things have changed and you've made an overreaction.
That said, Bronwyn, I mean, it's probably worth saying Herzog is absolutely not a Netanyahu. He doesn't. I mean, he was the opposition to.
So he said he'll deal with any prime minister. And he's not particularly a sympathiser.
No.
Yeah, but I was very struck, in a sense, how assertive. Let's put it that way. He was.
And he was very clear about all kinds of things, but saying Iran is the problem. Iran is an existential threat to the only Jewish nation on earth. We will do whatever we can to remove that threat. And my concern, amplified, if anything, by your interview, is that what Israel is doing is creating the conditions that might allow it to strike at Iran to stop Iran getting a nuclear weapon. It's waiting on the US election. The Americans are very fed up by what's happened in Lebanon, by Israel escalating things. They weren't thoroughly consulted in any way. But Israel is, by taking out Hezbollah's communications, then some leaders of Hezbollah, weakening a problem on its northern border. It couldn't strike at Iran with Hezbollah as strong as it was there. I'm not saying it's intending to do that, but it is creating it as an option, and I think that is a real concern.
Yeah, I was going to say this was definitely on the agenda when Starmer went over to the White House last week, and the bomb issue was very high.
Sorry, I've got to go to a break now. Sorry, we'll come back. Next, we'll get a reaction to that interview from the Palestinian ambassador to the UK.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, let's hear some reaction to that interview with the Israeli president. I can speak now to the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Husam Zomlot. Good morning, Mr. Zomlot. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, can I just ask you, what is the mood in north of Israel amongst Palestinians after this week's explosions, the pager explosions and so on?
Good morning, Trevor. The mood all over Palestine and the region is that Israel, Netanyahu, and the composition, with the failure of the international community, is expanding the war, and they are absolutely just waiting for the worst. Nobody is expecting things to de-escalate. A ceasefire deal was on the table for the last 4 months, a Security Council resolution for that matter, and simply Netanyahu has refused all these offers. And I think it is well documented now that the Israeli government has not only changed the goalpost when it came to the negotiations about a ceasefire, but the whole pitch all together. So everybody is hurt, is worried, is concerned, is really bleeding, and everybody is embracing for the worst, unfortunately.
When you say everybody's waiting for the worst, what is the worst?
That Israel will continue unleashing the only option they have, which is mass violence against the Palestinian people and the people of the region. I mean, I've just followed some of your interview with the Israeli president. It's very unfortunate. It's so chronic. It tells you all what you need to know, that the problem is not Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the current government. The problem is way structural in Israel. I was listening to a security spokesman rather than a president who would really give a way out of this tragedy, out of this mayhem, and provide a peace vision for all concerned. Leave the propaganda about babies beheaded and raped to the security spokespeople, but a president, and this is the issue that needs to be discussed. Trevor,
just to be clear, that some of those things did happen.
Trevor, that has got to be vetted by international institutions, by the UN and by courts. And I tell you, until now, nothing whatsoever have been confirmed as per the Israeli propaganda. But you have followed all the UN reports about Israeli rape inside Israeli prisons of Palestinian detainees. And by the way, that was the base of why the British government took the legal decision to stop some of the arms trade, which is incomplete. It should have been full arms embargo, because of Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons. However, that's not the propaganda. Is not the job of a president. Future is, and how do we move from this rather tragic moment that is affecting everybody, Trevor? And you know what? You have discussed with him, and you've been discussing this issue, but absent from all this discussion is the actual issue. He tells you a few minutes ago that imagine if Brighton or Bournemouth is attacked. You should have pushed back immediately and tell him that Britain does not occupy Bournemouth or Brighton, does not colonize Bournemouth or Brighton, does not besiege the people there. So absent from all this discussion is the heart of the matter, the root cause of all this. And how do we visit? Do we have a plan, Trevor? Does Israel have a plan, and do we have a plan? And does Britain and the rest of the world?
We have discussed that point with Israeli spokespeople before. But I just want to get from your reaction to Herzog, because it's well known Herzog is no great friend of Netanyahu. Did his stance surprise you?
Absolutely. He was today not only a spokesman for Netanyahu, he was a spokesman for the extreme right-wing mindset that has one thing in their ideology for a long time. Preclude any Palestinian political or national rights, maintain a permanent occupation, overstress security. And Trevor, you and I has got to agree on one premise before we go on. Security is an outcome of peace. And if we agree that security is only an outcome of peace, so we have got to be busy discussing peace. What I heard from Herzog today is just a repeat of decades-long insistence that Israel can enjoy full security without fulfilling the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. And that's exactly what struck me today and every day, that this isn't just about Netanyahu. It has gone into an entire society that thinks that they can actually keep doing this for eternity without any consequences. And then Herzog complains, and some of your own guests here, that Britain has taken the very small step of saying that international law has got to be respected. You've heard the British Prime Minister in the Parliament a couple of weeks ago saying that this government takes international law seriously. And then here, your role, Trevor, your role to push back against the practice of war that is happening in Gaza.
Ambassador, I'll do the interviews the way I want to do them, but just let me quickly ask you, last 20 seconds, are you less hopeful after you've heard that interview, or is it the same?
No, I'm just more convinced. It's not about hope. Hope is filling my heart because of our people and the steadfastness, because of the solidarity of the international community. You've seen the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, the millions all over the world. You've seen Liverpool only yesterday, tens of thousands. What is happening in the UN, the International Court of Justice ruling that all this is unlawful and must end. And Trevor, last sentence. Please push back when it comes to international law. What Israel done in Gaza and now in Lebanon are all war crimes.
OK. Ambassador, be sure we'll do our job. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Right. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast equivalent of a Pro Plus caffeine tablet that tells you everything about what you need to know in the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico. With me in the Zoom call is Sam Coates of Sky News.
The front runner among the members, Kelly Badenoch, did much worse than I was expecting. Now, traditionally and historically, MPs want to rush to back early the front-runner candidate because it helps your chances of getting a job further down the track. It's good to be seen to be there early with the person who's going to win. And the fact that even though she was topping a lot of the surveys, that she didn't get more than 6 votes behind Robert Jenrick is very ominous for her campaign.
This issue had sort of bubbled away a bit last week. It was always going to come back this week because of the vote, but it was rather blown up again on Thursday due to a very prominent Labour Party commentator wading in on it and saying that Rachel Reeves might need an escape route. Now, that person was Ed Balls, who used possibly one of the most prominent Labour figures to speak about Treasury matters.
Oh, my God.
What happened?
Sorry, I've got... my cat is fighting another cat through the window. I'm going to have to stop it.
There's a cat fight.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Back to our panel, Harry Cole, Kitty Donaldson and Bronwyn Maddox. Now, OK, we've done some homework. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer's popularity this morning, 2 days before he makes his first big speech as Prime Minister. I think if I were in the Labour Party leadership, I'd be a bit worried about this. Keir Starmer is less popular than Rishi Sunak was at his nadir. Kitty.
Yeah, it's not the greatest line, is it? It's a bit of a. If you're a doctor, you wouldn't want to see that one on a chart next to a patient. But listen, we're only 11 weeks in, I think. Elections. We've got elections next year, county council elections, which Labour should do fairly well at, because the Tories were on a high at the last point when these elections were held. But we've got 4 or 5 years until the next general election. I don't think they're be unduly worried about the flatlining at the moment. It is bad, but I think what they need to do is get a grip. They seem to have got a grip a bit, although what Bridget was saying shows them there's probably more to come. I think there's a distinction here between.
But what happens when they start whacking on some taxes?
Well, that's the thing. If you look at that line, it's not freebies. That line was going in the wrong direction even before this story broke a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
The winter fuel payment thing, as we discussed earlier, they know they're going to be unpopular. They know they've got unpopular things to do. I think what we need to see and to get that line started to go the other way is what is the pain for? And I think that's what cabinet ministers and backbench MPs, who should be in quite a euphoric state. They've got a 170-odd majority. Their dominance is indisputable in Parliament. But they're walking around looking like, pretty glum, actually. They need a little bit. They need what is the pain for? And that's what we're not getting from this government. Why do you need to do this stuff?
These aren't good figures for them. Let's see. I think everything hangs on the budget, which isn't what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be talking about in this conference, but that is really going to be the text by which this government sets out what it is going to do and where you should put your optimism or your criticism and so on.
OK. If you want to hear one thing, you've each got about 10-15 seconds from Keir Starmer on Tuesday. What would it be?
I think, tell us what this change actually is. You said you're going to change, it's going to be different, but all we're getting now is a sort of slightly sped-up version of what the Tories were doing.
If you're going to do doom and gloom, at least do a few decent gags along the way, right? That's what I want. I want some jokes.
Yeah. I don't think Keir Starmer's...
I know.
Known comedian, Keir Starmer, yeah.
No,
it's how he tells it.
Bronwyn,
Europe.
Anything you think could make a real difference?
A bit of hope about Europe, particularly the young people's mobility. I'm surprised Labour has been so down on that.
Yeah. The one thing which actually... This shoot thing, this closing, has actually cut through. Just very quickly, let me show you this. That actually the public says, on the donations business, it's really cut through. Not acceptable.
Our postbag has been pretty lively.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see what happens later on in the week. Don't forget, you can watch Sophie every night this week. Get your fill of politics. Join us again next week at the Tories, 08:30 Sunday.